Hello there everyone, my name is Christina and today I want to show you how to make this double heart wirework pendant. And this is what it looks like. So you have your larger heart with love in it and then a smaller one attached to it. And then I've just made this gemstone chain to go with it. And actually I've made a whole set, so it's a bit like a Valentine set, I think. So this is the pendant, or the necklace part of it. And it's this pendant that I'm going to show you how to make today, but I also just want to show you the other components that I made to the set. And the first thing of that is I also made a pair of earrings that look like this. So each earring has a heart but then an arrow going through it, and then again I just made a link like I did on the chain for the necklace. So it's the same gemstones and the same thing to make it a set so they match. And those are the earrings that I made. And I thought I wanted to do the same style so they would match with the set as the pendant. So as you can see, they match nicely because of the style of wirework that I've done. But I also wanted them to be different, so it wasn't the exact same thing. And they hang nicely as well in the ear, just like this, because you have the loop right in the middle of the hat. Whereas on the pendant, it hangs kind of on the side of the large hat. But that hangs nice as well because you have the two hats put together. So those are the earrings that I made for the set. And then I also made a bracelet, and this one I just wanted to keep really simple because I thought I wanted to keep the pendant and the earrings as the main focus. So I just made a simple gemstone chain here, exactly the same as for the necklace, the same gemstones and everything. So the bracelet here is quite simple and delicate, but it still matches the whole set. And then finally I made this ring as well. So that's what this looks like. So I wanted to put the word love in there to kind of make it go with the theme, but without making an actual hat. And again I've used the same gemstones. So this is the ring band going all the way around. And this is what it would sit like on your finger. So that's the ring to match, and again, even though it's not the exact same, the shape or anything, because you're using the same gemstones throughout, that makes it kind of match nicely as a set, I think. So that's the ring. And then the final thing I just want to show you is actually the very first part that I made, and it's kind of the prototype to the necklace, or the pendant, and it's this. So this is the original idea I had, just making one heart with love written inside of it. And this was just a prototype, the first one I made. And what I kind of thought, this ended up being a little bit too large. That's why I thought I would make another one. And then as I was making that second one, and I reached over here, I kind of thought I wanted to add the extra feature of a second hat. That's why it kind of developed. But I started with this. And what I kind of think, personally I think this is a bit large for a pendant. But I kind of thought this would look nice sewn onto something like a hat or a bag or something. But the idea itself, you could easily make a pendant because I put the loop up here so it hangs a bit at an angle. So you could quite easily make this as a pendant and just a little bit smaller maybe. So that's just another idea. But for this tutorial I'm going to focus on showing you how to make the pendant here. So if you want to learn how to do this, then keep watching. And so to make this pendant, all we really need is the wire itself. Because as you can see, the pendant itself I've only used wire for. It's the chain that I've used the gemstones. So we'll just need the wire for this. And all we're going to be working with is these two different gauges. Now in this case both of them just regular round wire, and I'm just using a silver colour. You can obviously use whatever you want. And this first one is going to be a base wire, so kind of the structure of the piece. And this is a 0.8mm. And now we don't need that longer length of this. So we just need a bit of this, and then the other one here is a 0.4mm, and this is going to be the weaving wire to the piece. And obviously we'll need a bit longer length than the 0.8mm just because you use more of your smaller gauges when you weave. And then apart from our wire, we'll also need some tools, and I'm just using some basic ones throughout the video, and I'll explain that as I go. And really it's just a matter of figuring out, using what works for you as well to get your shapes and all that. So just some basic tools and then your wire. So get all your things together and then let's get started. And now the first thing that we need to do is we need to cut a wire. And the first one is a 0.8mm wire. And you need a length of about 65 centimeters of this, and this is going to basically be our base wire, so it's going to create the framework for our piece. And then what we'll need to cut as well is we need a length of a 0.4mm wire, and this is the weaving wire, and we'll need about 2.5 meters of this. Now this is just to try and do the whole thing in one go. Use one length of wire. If you feel uncomfortable working with this longer length, you can use a shorter length, but you'll probably have to add in as you go. So when you're making your hat, it'll reach so far and then you'll have to add in some more, which you can do. Just try and add it in so it looks seamless. But I prefer to try and use one length of wire whenever I can. So we need this length of a 0.4mm wire. So now we need to start working on creating the piece, and the very first thing that we need to do is we need to get a 0.8mm wire out. That's going to be the base, because we need to start the wire writing first. So we need to write the word first low. That's the very first thing we need to do, and then use that 0.8mm wire to start creating the shape as well. So that's the first step. And now what I'm going to show you is, the way I've done it is I've done the whole thing freehand. So the shape of the hat and everything. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can always find a shape of a hat that you like and then just follow that on some paper and then follow the shape with your wire as you go. So if you're not 100% comfortable doing it freehand, that's another option for you. But to start the shape, like I said, we need this length of wire, the 0.8mm, and I'm going to be starting towards one end of it. And to begin with, what I'm just going to be using for my pliers are some basic ones. So I'm just going to be using a chain nose. You can also use a flat nose, but a chain nose can be a little bit more handy sometimes because it has this nice fine tip to it. So you can really get in some places where you can't get in with a flat nose. So I'm going to be using that and then a regular round nose plier. And this is just to begin with to help me form the word. So to start creating the word, I'll have this line here so we can reference to it. So what we need to do is start with the L, because as you can see the very end of a wire is what create the very first little loop there to start creating the L. And then for this I'm just going to get my round nose pliers. And now when you do this word, what I just want to say is try and be a little bit aware of the sizing of your word, so the sizing of your letters, because they can help determine how large your pendant is actually going to be. That's why the first one I made, this one, that was a prototype, this was a bit larger and I ended up making the hat a bit larger because of it. So this one I purposely tried to make the word smaller. So just be a little bit aware to not make this too large, unless you want the pendant to be large obviously. But what I'm going to do is I'm get my round nose pliers, and then towards the very end I'm just going to go in and make a little loop. And we don't want this to be too large. So just a nice little loop here, coming all the way back around. So the very end of the wire meets, basically the end meets itself on the other side. Now I like to make sure that this loop is as round as it can be. So like in this one it's quite round. You'll find quite often if you just make a loop like this with your round nose pliers that it becomes a bit more like an oval shape or a teardrop shape. So to avoid that I'm going to then get my flush cutters, and these are just the ones that I'm going to be using. Now I really like these flush cutters, I highly recommend them. If you don't have them you can just use some regular wire cutters as well. But I do like using these, especially for detail work. So what I'm going to do is there, right at the end of my wire, so where we started creating the loop, I'm just going to go in and cut off about 1 millimeter or 2, like that. So you can see there's a bit more space now. And then go back in with my round nose pliers and loop again to finish off that loop, so it becomes one full loop. Now you can see, and now it's a lot more rounded. And then I just like to get my chain nose pliers and press that down just to make sure it's all flat and level, so you don't have the ends sticking out a little bit. Because you want to make sure in this piece, or any piece you do for that matter, to not have your ends sticking out and hanging free, especially if it's something you're going to be wearing, so it doesn't catch or scratch on anything. So that's the beginning of our L. And now what we need to do is create the back of it. So that needs to come down here. So I use my fingers the whole time as well to kind of help shape my wire. and also it warms it up so it makes it more malleable and easier to shape. But I want this to come down a bit at an angle from the loop, and then we need to do is come down where it bends and create the bottom of our L. And again, this is kind of where you want to be careful not making it too large, so your letters end up becoming too large in relation to how large you want the actual pendant. So I put in my chain nose pliers here and then bend my wire so we get an angle like this going away from the loop. So that's going to be the almost the L finished, and then I just like to bend it up a little bit more so it kind of starts coming up here at a bit of a sharper angle like that. So now to finish off the bottom of the L and move on to the next letter, I just want to get a little curve on the bottom here so it stands out a bit from the frame, because as you can see you have a frame running underneath, so I just want to make sure the L stands out from that properly. So I just use my round nose pliers and place them around the middle of where the bottom of the L is, and it's just to come back down basically. So you create that angle there at first, come up a little bit so you get a bit of a shape to the bottom. So that's now basically the L, so we need to move on to the O now, and for this you can use your round nose pliers if you want to. I'm just going to grab another pair of pliers, and these are 6-step bell making pliers, and these are just where you have 6 different sizes, and it's really handy if you want specific size, because in your round nose pliers they're tapered, so you have to be very specific about where on your pliers you put your wire if you want the same size loops. And it's just these, I know what size the loops are and I know what size I want, so I'm just going to be using these. But like I said, if you only have round nose pliers you can use them. But I'm going to be using the second smallest to make the O, because that's the size I want the O to be. And we're going to put them right here after the L, so where I want the O to be. So place them there, and then we need to wrap the wire around like that, and I come back around to the front side. You can go to the back side if you want, I just prefer coming to the front side all the way, so it's coming back the same direction it was. We're just basically putting in a loop to create the O, and then that's roughly the loop, and then obviously we just go in and adjust it until you're completely happy. So this is a little bit too far away I think, so I'm just going to roll it back a little bit until it sits right where I want it to. So that's a bit better. So that now you have your L and your O. And then moving on to the V, what I want is for the V to start from the top. So actually I want my tail of my wire here to come out from further towards the top of the O. So I'm just going to make sure I put my plier back in to make sure I keep the shape, and then just pull it upward instead of coming out along the word like it did before. So pull it up more like that, so we more have it in position now to be ready to start creating the V. And then for this I'm going to use my chain nose pliers again. This is where it's best using the chain nose pliers, because you kind of need to get in there, but there isn't that much space to work with. So from the front, because I have the wire looping over itself creating the O towards the front here, so I'm going to place my chain nose pliers, find out where I want the V to start, so the height, so it's about level with the O, and then grab onto your wire. You can also go from the other side, and then you just want to make sure that they're about the same level, your letters here. So just take your time. You can measure it if you want to. I just like to go by eye, and then bend this back down. So we're creating an angle there to start the V off. We just want a bit of a sharp angle, so that when it comes down the very point of the V that hits the bottom, it's going to actually hit the bottom, but it's all going to be in proportion. And when you then have that angle in there, we need to then come back up again to create that V shape. And again, this is kind of just judgment really. So you want to get the bottom of the V level to the bottom of the other levels, the other letters as well, sorry. So you want to place your pliers in, and you can either place them and then bend your wire against them, or you can place your pliers on the wire and then bend your pliers. How you work with that is up to you. That's whatever comes natural to you, or what you find most comfortable. I'm just going to place my pliers in and bend the wire. And then again we need to get kind of a sharp angle on this to come back up, because it still needs to be in proportion. And what you can do to get sharper angles on your wire is, because when you just bend it like this, it's a little bit of a soft angle, I would say. So you kind of go in on both sides and just squeeze right where you've made that bend, and that sharpens it up nicely. And then just keep bending it until you're happy with the shape of it, and it comes back up so you're getting the proportions right there. So now to create the very last letter, that's the E, we need to get into position first. So we need to just finish off the V by getting the very last angle in place, so the top angle on the other side here. And again, we need to make sure it's level with all the other letters going across the top. So you just want to take your time and get it as even and level as you can for your wire to come back down. So place your pliers in again, bend your wire like that, and you can see it's quite level with the other side of the V. So for this, I'm going to take my round nose pliers again, because they have a bit of a finer point than the bail making pliers, and then just going to place my pliers a bit just below where you have made that angle, because that's where we want the loop in the E to be. We need to make that first now. And I'm just using my round nose pliers because we need a smaller loop than we made with the O. And then I want to bend my wire back on itself like this. You don't have to do it all the way tight to your plier. The pliers here are more of a guide, because you don't necessarily want the loop to be completely round. And then what I do is I take this wire then around the back of the word. So on the O we came around the front, and on the E here we're going to go around the back, just to make it as flat as possible really. So just keep manipulating this, working with this until you're happy with the loop, the way it looks, and again how the words are level with each other. So that's kind of the top of it now. And then you got your wire looping around the back, and then we just need to finish off the bottom of the E. So again, I'm just going to place my pliers into the loop again, just to hold the shape in place. And then I'm just going to gently pull the tail here around, but again not tight, it's just to create the bottom shape. You're kind of doing this freehand, because you need some soft curves on most of it. And it's kind of a little bit hard to get too many pliers in there, in the tight spaces and that. So you have the loop on top, and then your wire comes back down to finish off the E. And there we basically have the finished word that we're going to have inside the hat. And obviously, as you can see, wire writing like this is kind of freehand. It's kind of using the tools that you can use as you go and getting the shapes right, and just getting the proportions right as well. But then just to finish off the word, I've made a little dip up here, you can see that right where the E ends, just again to separate the word out from the frame. So I'm just going to do that. You can use round nose pliers or the chain nose pliers. And then I've got the wire coming a little bit upward now, so I'm just putting my pliers in and to come back down. So just to give you that little dip, just to make the word stand out. And then now we have the word ready, so now it's time to start making the frame. So to make that hat shape and create the frame of it, what we need to do is start using the rest of this length, so what's coming out from the word, and you can just use your hands and your fingers, and I use them as well anyway, throughout, help mold your wire and give it some nice rounded curves and warm it up as well so it's easy to shape. So you can do that and then use some basic pliers as well to get your bends in there, or you can use tools like these, where these are again some bail making pliers with 3 different sizes on, and these are just larger ones that you can make, and I've just used the smallest one on this to help create the shape of the hat. Again, this will then help determine how large you want your hat to be, but also just give you some nice rounded curves on it. But again, you can just use whatever you have at hand or something else that's got the shape that you want it to be. So I'm going to grab these pliers and use them, and like I said, if you don't have these, just use something else of roughly the size that you want the loops on your hat to be, or the curves on your hat. Because also it's going to be a little bit hard to get in there all the way because we have the word in the way. But that's why I'm just going to show you how I do it. So place these pliers down right after where my word ends, and then I'm just going to shape the wire here around that one, and just do it gently. It's just to get a nice curve in there mainly, because we can always adjust the size, and then you're going to end up with something like this. And like I said, if you don't have these, have something else that's got roughly the size or the shape, and just place that in there to shape it around. And then, because I personally feel this is a bit too big, because if you look, when I place it in there, I can't really get my pliers much further down because then the word is in the way. So I can only use my pliers to this point. But if you compare it with the other one that I already made and place the word there, you can see this would end up being bigger. So I just want to adjust the size of this a little bit. And that's why I said you kind of do it as you go. Use your fingers and use things that you have at hand. And then you can just switch them out with some other pliers if you want to. And it's just pulling it down gently. So you're keeping the shape of the curve, but you're just adjusting the size of it. So just do this. You can use your fingers as well, your hands, like so. And then just until you're happy with it and you feel that this is going to be a good size for your hat. So I'm quite happy with the size of this now and the shape of the curve that we have here. So now we need to move down to the cleft of the hat. So we need to get an angle right here about the middle. Remember, this is the one side of the hat. So imagine you have the point of your hat down there. So you need the cleft of your hat about the same place. And then so we can start creating the shape on the other side. And like I said earlier, if you're not quite confident enough to do this freehand, this shape, so you're going to be happy with the shape, you can always make sure that you have, if you found the shape or a picture of a hat that you like and the size as well, print it off, have it on a piece of paper, and you can always use that to follow along. So keep referencing back to that. So imagine this would be my sketch or a piece of paper of it, and then just place it down on that shape that you have, that you're happy with, and then just use that. So have it lying here like I'm doing now, and then you can see where you want the point or the cleft of your hat to be, and you would place your pliers just roughly around there. So like this is where the cleft will be, and then bend it up to get that angle in the right place. So there you have the cleft. So place it, when I place it down, it'll sit right where you want it to sit. So that's if you have like a sketch that you're following, or on a piece of paper or something, or something else, the shape of your hat that you want it to be. So that's the way you can do it. It's still freehand, but you're just kind of following along with the sketch. So now you have that angle in place there. So now you have that angle in place, what I want to do is to kind of sharpen it up, just like I was explaining about before. And to do that, I'm just going to again grab my chain nose pliers and then just go in from both sides and just gently squeeze while I'm bending a little bit more to get the complete right angle. And that's how you get a nicer, sharper bend, like so. And then make sure you come up at a right angle again, because then now we need to do the other side of the hat to replicate the shape and size on this side. And again, I'm going to then take my piece here and then grab that tool that I used before, just because I know that this is going to end up being the same size. So whatever you use to create the other side, just do the same thing. And just place it a bit just above where you just made your angle. So like so. And then we need to shape it around there again. To come back on the other side here. And just do it gently and kind of keep checking it as you go to see if it's correct and you're happy with it, with the size and the shape of it. And just keep going back to it. And like I said, if you have that hat or something, a sketch that you're following, keep referring back to it. Always double checking. It's not too far off. Just adjust this a little bit until you're completely happy and both sides look as similar as you can get them to look. And then on the other side here, when you're coming back down with the tail of your wire, you want to make sure that you're coming down and that's straight down. So you want to straighten this piece of wire, not have any bends or kinks in that. So you're coming down to form the very point of it at the bottom, but then also to be able to connect back up to the word. So I've now kept adjusting it, and to imagine again like this is my sketch if I'm following something, or just until I'm happy with the way it looks. If you're doing it all by freehand, you can just do that. But then I'm quite happy with how it sits, size wise and shape. So now what we need to do is create the very point on the bottom of the hat here. So again, you can follow your sketch if you have one. So again, I'm going to take my chain nose pliers here because we need to make that point. So we need an angle. So you can hold your piece if you've got anything that you're following, and then place, again, just place your pliers where you need that next bend to be. If you're not following anything, all I do now is where the point is, I want it to be roughly as close as you can get to being right underneath the cleft. And also we need to come back up now, so we're basically creating a line underneath the word, as you can see here. And that's going to help create the frame and then keep everything in place and held together. So you want to place your pliers where you feel like that's going to be, and then bend your wire to come back up this direction. And then in a straight line, so you have a straight line underneath your word here. And then you've basically finished the shape of your hat. So again, just keep adjusting until you're completely happy with it. Refer back to your sketch if you have one, or shape. And then what we need to do now is start incorporating our weaving wire so we can create a more firm piece to work with and continue the shape. So you've now done kind of what I would call the trickiest part of this pendant. Obviously the same when you get to the hat, you'll be needing to do the shape as well. But once you have the shape in place, it's not that hard to do the rest. You kind of just have to follow the shape, creating the rest of it while you're weaving. But I'm going to show you how to do that. And then until we obviously reach the other hat, then we need to do that as well. But then you want to get your weaving wire. So this is your 0.4mm wire. And then just start towards one end of it. And I'm just going to first attach it to this long length that we have left. And just use the tail to begin with to wrap it with a shorter length. And I'm just going to coil it around a few times to fasten it onto the wire. And then I like to make sure that my coils are nicely pushed together, so they're nice and tight and they look nice and even. So when you're doing your coils, just push them together like so, and then just do a few of these. And then once you've done a few, I'm going to push it down on this wire, so down towards here where the word starts. And now what we need to do is keep wrapping along this bottom wire, but also incorporating the word into it. So that's going to keep hold of each other and become kind of one solid piece. And now I've just made sure to keep a bit of that tail that I just wrapped a little bit with the short end. It's just going to help you keep hold of it to begin with. We can always finish that off at the end. And now, to incorporate the word into it, right now I'm just coiling around, but what I'm going to do is I have my long tail here coming out towards the top, and then I would wrap around this way, come back down the bottom to keep wrapping. Obviously it doesn't matter, you could do it the other way, it doesn't matter, but what I'm going to do to incorporate the word is I'm going to do a figure of 8 wrap a couple of times around the bottom one and the top one to fasten them together basically. So now when I've reached right underneath where the bottom of my L meets that wire, I'm going to then go around the top and through the hat instead, and then pull everything through. And now this is where, because we're working with such a long length of weaving wire, it's a little bit tricky, mostly here in the beginning while it's still long, because obviously the further you get the more you use and then the less you have left. But that's why I say if you're not comfortable working with this long length, just take a shorter length, but you'll just have to add in. But if that's what you're going to do, then that's fine. But if you want to try and work with a long length, just take your time when you're pulling it through to try and make sure you don't damage the wire and cause unnecessary kinks in that. So I'm wrapping around, and right here where the first part of the L meets the bottom, I'm going to wrap around with a figure of 8 wrap. Just make sure everything sits the way you want it to sit. Make sure the bottom wire is straight. And then if you can, keep hold of it like so. And then that's the first wrap around the L. I'm going to go back down to the bottom, but this is where it's the figure of 8. So if you imagine you have your 2 wires like there, you're wrapping around like this, coming in between every time. And I'm just doing this a couple of times. So we wrapped around the once on the L there, around the bottom wire again, and then back up through the middle in between the 2, and then push them nice and tight together so you get nice tight coils and wraps, just so it looks nice and neat. And just to show you, as you can see here, I was going to pull my wire through, and quite often you'll find you get this when you're doing this weaving with longer lengths of wire. Now what you want to avoid doing, you don't want to just pull it through, because here you can risk a kink is going to appear on your 0.4mm wire, and that can damage and weaken the wire. So before you pull through, catch it and undo it before you then pull the rest through, just so you don't want to damage your wire too much in case it might end up snapping later on. If it does happen, don't worry too much about it. Like I said, you can also work with a shorter length if you prefer that. You'll just have to add in some more wire. So if it does snap, don't panic too much about it, just add in some new wire. Like so, come back around the bottom of the L again, up through the middle in between the wires, and then once more around the bottom wire here, and up through the middle. And push them nice and tight like this. So there we have the beginning of connecting the 2 sides, so the word to the other part of the frame here. And now that is fine for just right here. We've connected the L. So what I'm going to do is go back to the bottom wire, so just the long length that we have left here, and just keep coiling around that for a bit. And I'm just going to keep coiling until I reach the next place on the word that kind of sits and hits the bottom wire. So in this case that will be my O. So once I reach my O, I'm going to do the same, wrap around a few times there to connect them after you've done coils on this bottom one. So I've now kept coiling for a bit until I reach the bottom of my O here. So again, I'm just going to show you how to do that. I'll do the exact same way. The only thing in this case, you have to wrap through the O so you don't have the whole space of the hat. So I'm just going to grab the very end of my weaving wire and poke that through the O. And again, just do this carefully, pull your whole length through, and this is again doing the figure of 8 weave just like I showed you on the L. So just pull your whole length of wire when you're getting these kind of that will be turning into kinks if you don't watch out for them, if you're not careful. Make sure you just undo them before you keep pulling, like so. You get the whole length through, and then come back up through the middle to achieve that figure of 8 weave, like that, and then back down around the bottom, up through the middle, just to attach the O to that base wire as well. And again through the O one more time. And like I said, I prefer I'm going to be doing this twice in each letter basically. So doing the figure of 8 weave twice. I did that on the L, I'm doing that here. So pull your whole length through. This is the second time. Going through the O. Like that. Make sure everything is still nice and tight. Be careful when you're pulling though, you're pulling tight. You don't want to risk misshapeing your frame or anything. And then back up through the middle. And then back down to the bottom one. And then we're back to just wanting to coil around the bottom one, because we've now attached the O as well. So keep coiling around the bottom one until you reach the V. Do the same thing right at the point there. So another 2 figure of 8 wraps around there. The same with the E until we reach the very end of the word. And that's how you then attach the word to the rest of the frame. So I've now kept wrapping all the way, attaching each letter just like I showed you. And I've now reached the end here. We're going to start working on the actual frame of the hat, which looks like that. So this is a bit of a different wrap we're going to be doing now. So I will no longer be doing the figure of 8 wrap. What we're going to do is kind of what's known as a 2x2. So right now I'm coming up through the middle and then around the bottom one again as if I was going to do another coil. Instead of just doing that, I'm going to go behind both of my wires, so the long end that I'm just been coiling onto, and then actually just through my hat. Like this. Pull your whole length of wire through. And just as well, I just want to say, if you do want to try and work with this long length of wire instead of shorter, just to have the whole thing be one piece, a little tip is to just try and have enough space around you. That's going to help a lot, so you don't get caught on things or kind of poke someone else that's sat next to you. So I'm going to wrap it around both wires here, around the back, coming back around the front, and then one more time I'm going to go through the hat, coming behind both wires, and then pulling all of it through again, like that, and then back around the front, making sure I place that wire right next to the one I just did. So we now have 2 wraps right next to each other that are both going around both wires. And then to continue my wraps, I'm going to again come behind both wires up through the hat. And this is just how I like when I have a long length of wire that I'm weaving with. I kind of like looping it through like this first instead of finding your end every time and then poking that through. If you do it this way, you're also less likely to get kinks, because you just kind of pull the wire through like this. Obviously you still can, so still be careful and do it gently. But then now we're up through the hat here, but instead of wrapping over both of our wires now, I'm going to come down through the middle like that and squeeze it all together so your wraps are nice and tight. And now I want to do 2 wraps again, but only around the frame of the hat, so the inside wire, like that, making sure your wraps line right next to each other, down through in between the 2 wires again, and then back up through the hat. Like so. So we're now coming up through the hat. We have 2 wraps around both wires, and 2 wraps around just the inner wire of the hat. And then again we want to do 2 wraps around both wires again. So this is what I mean the 2x2 wrap. So as I'm doing this, what I'm going to do, because we're going to follow the shape of the hat all the way around, because we have 2 base wires lying to give it extra strength and to be able to weave, I'm not going to shape the wire first and then weave. I'm going to kind of shape the wire as I go. I find that a lot easier, and it just ends up taking the shape that you already created, and if you're happy with that shape, instead of worrying about trying to get the next shape right as well. So I suggest doing this as you go. So like I'm doing now, just push it a little bit to give it a little bit of curve right here where you're going to wrap. So I'm going to wrap around both wires now. As you can see, you have a bit of a curve around both, back up through the hat, pull it all through, and then making sure you wrap the line right next to each other, back around both again, up through the hat to do that second one, like that. So that's 2 on both wires. Now it's time to come back down through the middle again, making sure you squeeze them together every time, back up through the hat to do the 2 wraps on the single wire, down through the middle, and back up through the hat. Nice and gently. So that's another 2 around just the single wire. So now it's time to wrap around both, but as you can see, there's just a little bit more space there, so I'm just going to gently push this second wire that's still loose, the long length of wire. Just going to push that gently, just a little bit, so it gets the shape of the first wire that you made the hat shape with, and back up through the middle of the hat, wrap around both, like this. And once more, to make it 2. And then there you have another 2, and now it's time to go down through the middle and just around the single and back up through the hat. And this is the weave that I'm going to be doing. You just continue like this, gently every time you move a bit further. Push this into the shape, give it that curve so it follows the pattern of the hat, or the shape of the hat. So keep doing that until we reach down here, and then we'll need to do the angle, and I'll show you how to do that. So I'm now reaching the point here where I'm getting to the cleft of my hat, and we have that angle from the first wire. So we need to do the same with this one. Now when I've been wrapping this side, I've just made this go underneath here, just for now, until I get further down, and just wrap the same way. So now what I need to do, I'm just going to do another wrap, just show you how I've been doing it. You need to come up through the hat, just like the other times, and now I've reached the point where I just need to wrap the one wire. So I just come underneath and go back like this. Instead of weaving in and out too much, this is just an easy way because this is lying underneath your hat. So this is just the way I do that. Come back up again, pull everything through like that, and then back underneath and in between again. So this is just the way I've been wrapping while this wire, the long length, has been lying underneath the hat here. But then now, obviously we need to bend this long length of wire to match with the cleft of the hat from the previous shape that we made. And to do that, you just want to put your weaving wire to the side, because we just need to get the shape of this. So I'm just going to take my chain nose pliers again. Again, I prefer to use a chain nose just with this because you need to kind of make sure you can get in there. And then you have a little space left. So what you basically need to do is do this by eye. Again, place this where you want to bend your wire. So where you want to make that angle. And then bend it back up to come up the other way here. And just do this gently so you get it right. And again, you can just fine tune it like so. And then there you basically have the very point of the cleft of the hat, and then your wire's coming back up the other way here on the other side. And again, what you just want to do then is continue wrapping the same way, and then just incorporate the cleft. So I've now wrapped a bit further up this side, and I've reached the point where I want to put in my loop, so it hangs a bit. Say if you just did the one hat, it would hang a bit off center. and you could actually see the word more properly. But you can obviously put the loop wherever you want. This is just where I'm going to put it. So not quite at the top of that side, but almost. And then what I'm going to do is, for this, I'm going to grab my bail making pliers again. So the 6-step bail making pliers. And I'm just going to use the very smallest loop there. Again, you can quite easily just use your round nose pliers. I just prefer to use these so I know exactly what size loop I'm getting. And then I've finished the last wrap. I've done 2 around both, and then I've just done 1 wrap around the bottom wire just to kind of hold it in place. And then I'm just going to push this outer wire down a little bit away from the frame so I can get in there with my pliers. And then I grab onto that, just that wire, just bend it a bit so you have enough space, and place it right where you want the loop to go. And then I'm going to take the end, bend it back around my pliers here, so we're getting a loop, and then I'm going to come back around the front of the hat. And obviously it's going to be a little bit off center, a little bit crooked now, but then you just move your pliers around and then adjust it as you go. So you're kind of getting a loop that looks something like this. And you can just keep adjusting until you're happy with it. Completely in place. And then the end of your wire here is coming back out the same way that it was before you made the loop. So you're going to have it placed, so you're just basically going to continue the wrap afterwards. You're just having that loop added to it. So that's how you're going to make the loop. And then once you're happy with your loop and your wire's coming back out this way, you want to just continue with your wrapping. Now you obviously have a loop there in the way, so you can't do the wrap around both wires until after the loop. So what I'm just going to do is do the wrap around just the bottom wire, the inner one. So the single wrap, just all the way along below the loop. Right there. So that's just what you're going to do until you reach the other side of the loop. So just coil it for a little bit until you reach where you can then start doing 2 wraps around both wires again. So I've just done a few of them coils around the inner wire by itself. How many you do really depends as well how large you want your loop to be, how large you've made it. And it's just until you reach the point where you can wrap around both again. And I've kind of reached that point now. So I'm going to pull up through my hat again as if I was doing another wrap. And then now just come around both wires again to go back into the same wrap, the same pattern of wrap that we've done the whole way. So again, the 2 by 2, like that. So it's going to be quite seamless. You're going to have your continuous wrap there, and you just added a loop around the top here, but quite seamless because you still have your same pattern of wrapping here. So just continue this for a bit around the bottom one now, the exact same wrap, and the loop is going to be really nice and secure in there. It's not going to move because you've got your wrapping all the way around on both sides. So that's how you add the loop in, like that. And you can also do it wherever you want, like I said. I'm just doing it on this side. And then you want to continue doing the same pattern of wrap, the 2 by 2, a bit further down here. So down the other side of the hat until you reach the point roughly down here where I'm then going to add in the second hat to it. So continue doing this wrap. So I've now continued that same weave all the way around to reach the point on the side here where I want my second hat to be. So now we're going to start working on that and creating that second hat. So as you can see on the one I've already done, you have your second hat placed like this, and it's attached to the frame because we're using the same piece of wire that we're working with throughout. So what I need to start doing is create the very cleft of it right to begin with, and then start shaping the rest of it. So to do that, I'm going to grab my piece here, and then we have a long tail 0.8mm wire here still working with that. That's the loose one. That's the one we're going to be creating that hat with. And then I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers, and we just need to make a bend here, and I know where I've ended my weave now. That's where I want that hat to start. So what I'm going to do is take my chain nose pliers, and then on that loose piece of 0.8mm wire, we need to make a bend in this. So I go up to right below where my weave ends, and then I grab hold of it with the tip of my pliers just to be able to just get in there, and then I want to just bend it back like this, so you have it coming out a bit of an angle like this. And again, try and get your angles fairly sharp, just as much as you can. So there we have the 0.8mm wire coming out at an angle from the frame of the original hat, and that's going to be the beginning of our next hat. So now we need to keep moving and creating the shape. So we've just come down here at an angle to create the cleft. Now we need to come back up to create this side of the hat. So we need to come back up with our wire, so make another angle. And what I'm going to do is leave about 1 or 2 millimeters of that angle we've just made on the wire. So I'm just going to place my pliers in, and just leaving that 1 or 2 millimeters of space, and then bend this back up, something roughly like this. And then using chain nose pliers, if you have some with a nice fine tip to them, you can kind of use them as a measurement really. So the first angle you made, put your pliers in on that, right where your wire's coming out, and then bend the tail back around, coming up this way. And then you have a little space there where you made your first angle, and then coming back up to create the side of the hat. And then to make that first curve, what I'm going to do again is grab my 6-step veil making pliers, just because I know that the largest one on these is the size that I want the shape of this hat to be, so the curves. But again, you can use whatever you have or whatever you find. It's just something that you know is the shape that you want or the size, and also so you can use it on the other side as well to get the same size on both sides of the hat to make it as even as possible. So I'm going to use this, and what I'm going to do is put a link in the description box as well for where you can buy these in case you want them and you don't have them, because they are really useful in general if you like doing wire work, so I highly recommend them. They are some of my favourite pliers. But then I'm going to place this right here, so after I've made my bends in the wire, and then grab this and come back down like that. And then if it's a little bit too high, like you can see there's a bit too much straight space there, you just put your pliers in, because obviously I can't get them any further down because the other hat is in the way. But what you do is just put them in and then just roll it a bit like so, until you're happy with what size that's going to create. And you can keep working on it like everything else. Keep adjusting it until you're completely happy with the shape and the size. But then that's this part of the hat. And then when you have this side done, you need to make sure that the end of your wire, when you're moving down the hat, it becomes more straight down here. So if it's not quite straight, just straighten it out with your fingers gently so you don't pull the whole thing out of shape. So it comes down towards where the point of the bottom of the hat is going to be. And now what this really is, if you're following a pattern you have on a piece of paper or something, obviously you can just keep line it down, like I keep mentioning, referring back to it, and then make the shape. But otherwise it's just, what I would suggest doing is, if you're doing it freehand, try and imagine the hat in front of you as you're making the shape here. So don't use this frame for the other hat as a guide, because this is going to be a little bit off from that. So on this, the cleft and the point don't line up exactly with the frame of the other hat. So just try and imagine this hat on its own and try not to get distracted by that frame to get the shape correct and the proportions of the hat. So what I'm going to do is start making this very point to that small hat now, come back up on the other side to create the rest of the hat. Now once you're in this position, like I said all along, if you have a pattern or a drawing that you're following on a piece of paper or something, lie this piece, keep referring back to it, lie this on top, and then as you have it in position where you want it to be, and then you know where the cleft is up there, and then where the point is going to be, then grab your pliers while it's lying there, and then place them in where you want that next bend on your wire to be, and then grab it and bend while you're still holding your pliers there. And that's then kind of the way I would say to follow a pattern you have. Just put it down on whatever you're following and then place your pliers there and then bend straight away. That's the best way to get it as even as you want if you're following something. So come back up like this. Again, if you're doing it by eye, freehand, just judge it, look at it and then judge how you feel the hat is going to look. But come back up like this. So we now have the wire coming back up on the other side on top of the base hat that you made the first hat. So the wire comes on top of that and then we need to come back down on the other side. So like I said, on this side I use my bail making pliers. I'm going to use them again, just like I said, because I know I want obviously the curves on the hat to be the same on both sides. So I know I used the largest one of these. I'm going to go in and use that again. So place them there. So whatever you used, just use that same thing if you used anything. So I'm just going to go through my large hat like this and place my pliers on my wire. Like that. And then just pull the wire around there. Nice and gently. And then obviously you can keep adjusting it. So as you can see, that's a bit off, that's not quite right. But I have the main curve in place. So I'm just going to keep adjusting it until I'm completely happy with the proportions of the hat. So that's going to come back down the other side here, meet up with the very cleft, still above the base frame, so the larger hat, and just keep working on this, adjusting it until you're happy with the shape of the hat. So you can now see that a bit more clearly, the actual shape of this small hat. So just keep working on that. So I'm now happy with how this second hat looks that we're creating. Now we're back down to the cleft. So we're now in a position where when we start making the shape again, we're going to have two wires lying next to each other, just like around this main frame. And that's exactly what we want, because we want to continue that same design. So my hat is now in shape. So actually now what I'm going to do is go back to this weaving wire that we've used throughout the whole piece, and it's still attached. And obviously if you want to start a new piece of wire instead, if you don't have enough left, or if it's broken, or if you're not comfortable working with such a long length, you can just attach a new wire right around here and then start weaving with that one. But if you want to try and do it in one piece just like me, you want to grab this again now, and now we want to start building up the weave on this small hat. So actually where I am is I'm coming down through the two middle wires of this main frame right here behind it. So what I'm going to do is weave just around that little tip before the cleft just a couple of times. So you just take your time doing this, figuring out what works best for you. Do it nice and slowly, and then as you can see, we're starting to build up the weave now, and then we need to slowly start moving this in place. So you just want to start bending this gradually as you go and as you're making your weave, and do this all the way around, all the way to the other side here, and it's the same the whole way around. So just do that till you reach the other side of the cleft again. So I've now continued all the way around my hat here, the small hat that we're making now, and I've reached the end. And what I said about when you weave, try and weave so when you press your wire through, or you push it through to weave, just kind of loop it through like this. It'll prevent more kinks and also a bit easier than having to find the end all the time. You will come to a point where you will have to go to the end of your wire, your weaving wire, and then feed it through that way. And that's absolutely fine. It's just when you can, I find the other way a bit easier. So now we need to finish off this end and finish off the hat here. And to do that, what you'll find is when you've created this hat now, the long end of your 0.8mm wire, so your base wire, is coming out on top of your hat. What we want it to do is actually come down through. So what I'm just going to do is do this gently, take the end of my wire and then feed it down through the hat like this. Just do it gently so you don't get a bad kink in it. So just gently like this so you get curves and you can straighten it back out. So now it's down through the hat, so we'll be able to finish off the large hat that we made first with this, but we just need to get it into position first. And to do that, what I'm going to do again is get my chain nose pliers, because we just want to get a bend in there. So it's going to come straight down and lie next to this one on the outside. So I just go in and grab my wire here as close as I can. You might want to just straighten it out a little bit. I just like to use my fingers to do this. So go in and grab your wire with your pliers. I like to use the tip when I'm doing kind of detail work like this, when there's not much space there. That's the good thing about the chain nose pliers. And then bend it down. And you can just manipulate it again. Take your time. Come from the other side here. Might be easier. And then just until it's lying and running right next to the very last piece of your base wire on the large hat that you haven't wrapped yet. So this is what it looks like on the back side. So until you're happy, and then make sure it's running straight down along the side of the other one. So now that you've done that, this wire's now in position, so we can start weaving again, still using the same weaving wire if that's what you want to do. And then what we have, if you look on the back side, is coming out. I've just ended up where I'm coming out in between the two wires now. So what we want to do with this is go back to the weave we were doing on the large hat. So the same weave is here, but just the opposite way around. So the one we were wrapping around each time, you see that's covered completely, is on the inside of the hat, and where it's just two wraps every now and then is on the outside. So the opposite of the small hat. So you just want to go back into the rhythm of that. So I'm just going to come up through here. Just start that same weave off that we used throughout and come around both. And then just go back to that same weave again. And the only different thing here is that you have a little bit less space to work with, because you're kind of working in the middle of everything and you kind of always have to go in and out of something. But just take your time doing this, and you'll probably also have to use the tip of your wire now. Like the one I'm getting to now is where I need to go in between my two wires that I'm wrapping to just wrap around the one. So I'm just going to have to use the end and go through like this. So just do this nice and just slowly and gently to avoid damaging your wire. And continue getting your wraps nice and tight. So just push them up every time you've done a wrap, like that. And then continue this all the way down till your small hat meets with where you're wrapping now. So right now the bottom here isn't attached. You could actually flip this up. It's only attached on the top. But just wrap until there so you can reach it on the back side. And then we just need to fasten the small hat down here as well to the base. So I've now kept weaving down here, and then what you'll see on the back side is I've reached where the smaller hat, the bottom of that, crosses over the larger one. And now what I just need to do is kind of incorporate them into each other, so fasten them together. And now it's going to be a little bit hard for me to show you, but if you can see the weave that you've done, what you'll find is when you've done the 2 over 2 and then 2 over 1 and 2 over 2 and 2 over 1, you get like little spaces in between your wire, in between your weave, and that's what you kind of want to catch. So what you're going to do is take the end of your 0.4mm wire here that you're weaving with and kind of go through that behind your weave. So it's going to be a little bit tricky to get in there and also to show you, but just try and work at it and take your time doing that. One little thing that can help is to just make a little hook on the end of your 0.4mm wire here with your round nose pliers. I find that can be quite helpful. And then just take your time getting your wire in there. Find which weave you need to go through for it to match. And then when you hooked it in a little bit, it can help as well using your chain nose pliers to grab your wire as close as you can and just help push through with that. And then also helps with your chain nose pliers because you can really get in there to grab the end when you've gotten it through, and then help you pull the whole thing through. And just pull it through gently. And then when you tighten it, just make sure it sits correctly, because it'll be hard to undo. Just so it looks nice on the back as well. Like so. And then that's nice and secure. And what we'll say, if you struggle doing this, if you struggle getting your wire through, like the weave so it's completely invisible, what you can do as well is still come from the back, but then just go around the front here, and then go basically in between your weaves that you've done. And then if you try and just squeeze the wire in, whether you use your pliers or when you're pulling it tight, so just squeeze it in, it will kind of just blend in. And then obviously you put it down through and then keep wrapping on the other side. I don't need to do that because I managed to get it through. But if you do struggle getting it through, you can always do that, because if you manage to squeeze the wire down, it will blend in with your weave and you'll just have one space where you have 3 wires instead of 2 wrapping around, but you won't really notice that when you're just looking at it anyway. So this is now attached, and then all you need to do is just continue the weave right down until just before the very tip of the hat on the back here. So I've now kept wrapping here almost all the way down to the very tip of the large hat, and now all that's left to do, we're almost finished with the piece. All we really left to do now is to finish off all our wires. And then obviously what we're left with is we have 2 tails of a weaving wire here, the one right from the beginning and then the one here we've been using throughout. And then we have the long tail left of our base wire. We just have this one, because remember we started at the very beginning of the base wire on the L, so there's only this one left to finish. And the way that I'm going to do that is, I can show you on the one I've already made. And on the back side here, because I wanted to kind of finish it seamlessly, but still not have an end that's going to stick out or scratch or anything. So this is the front side, and then on the back, I've gotten this wire just to lie right on the corner, make a little bit of loop, little tiny loop there, and then just use the weaving wire just to wrap in that loop once or twice to keep it nice and secure. So you can't really see it, it's kind of become part of the design, but also it's nice and secure, and there's nothing here that's going to scratch or catch on anything, because you can just run your finger over it and then feel that. So that's what we need to do now. So before I cut it, what I want to do is just bend this so it sits in place. So that means I'm going to get my chain nose pliers out again, and then just right here at the very tip of the hat, what I want to do is basically just make a bend so it looks like it's all one piece, but the very loop and the end of this wire is just going to come in behind the very tip. So right where it would finish, if it's level with this side of the hat, I want to grab there and then bend this, and then bend it around the back like that. So it almost looks like it just finishes off the hat nicely, but the piece is actually coming towards the back. And just adjust that as well, that angle again, until you're happy. And then it's coming up a bit like this on the back side. And then we need to make that loop to then be able to finish it off. So the way that I'm going to do that is I need to cut this base wire down. So I'm going to get my flush cutters out again, and then cut it down about 1 to 2 centimeters at the most. We're only going to use a very little bit, but I'd rather just have a bit too much left, because you can always keep cutting it down until you're happy. So I'm going to cut it down about 1 centimeter or so, like that. And then I'm actually going to then take my round nose pliers, because I want this loop to be quite small. So my bail making pliers will make the loop a little bit too large. And then I'm going to start coiling this way in. So it's coming from this side, bending up behind the hat, and then I'm going to loop it in this way. And I'm just going to make the coil of the loop here quite small with my round nose pliers. Kind of as small as I can get it, but still just so I can get my weaving wires through when I've done it, just to secure it in place. And what I just want to do is I've made a little bit of the loop now, so I'm just going to go back in, cut off the very tip of it, because it's a little bit too long, but also just to get it nice and rounded. And this is how, if you've made it too long, it's better making it too long, because as you're making the loop you can do this, cut it off gradually more and more, until it's got just the right size, rather than cutting off too much from the beginning, and obviously you're kind of left with it the way it is then. And so it sits right there in the corner, like so. And then from the front, you can only just barely see it a little bit, but it kind of just incorporates into the design. So now what we need to do is just use these two weaving wires, finish wrapping them. So I have a little bit of space left here where I have my short end that we used right from the beginning. So I'm going to finish this off first. Just continue wrapping a little bit. And I'm just going to go from the front towards the back, but I'm just going to go through the loop then to secure that in place. Just a couple of times till I feel like it's enough. And also it's kind of covering up the loop and the end of the loop a little bit. So the end of the wire, so there's not going to be anything there that scratches. And then I'm still not going to cut it off. I just want to do the other one as well before I completely cut them off. And then on the other one here, the long tail that I have left, the one I've been weaving with throughout, I'm going to do the same. So I'm just going to continue this weave where it's a 2 around 1 and then 2 around 2, just to make sure the pattern doesn't kind of get disrupted. So I'm reaching now where I'm wrapping around both of them. So I'm just going to do the same thing, wrap around both, but then because I'm where the loop is, I'm just going to go through the loop towards the back here, again to secure it in place, like that, one more time. So it's going to look seamless because we're continuing the same pattern of the wraps that we've done throughout, like that. And then I've done 2 of them, so I'm just going to do where it's just around the single one. So I'm going to come up through in between the wires here. So you just need to make sure when you bend your wire to make that corner, you leave enough space that you can still go in between them. And then just pull it tight. And make sure everything sits right. Back through the loop again. And you just want to do this until you basically fill up the empty space down here. And then you can see on the back side as well, you loop this nice and secure. And it's covered up the end of your wire. So I've now wrapped around the bottom here and finished off the weaving. And then they're both coming out of the back, and then all that's left to do is really cut them off. So again, I'm going to take my flush cutters. If you don't have these, you can just use some wire cutters. Just try and make sure you get in as close as possible. Do one at a time, so I'm going to cut this off as close as I can, and then just grab my chain nose pliers again. So I always make sure to do this and just squeeze down the end, so I kind of try and tuck it in, so it gets tucked in somewhere where you have a bit of empty space, so it doesn't stick out. And the same with this one. Cut it down, and then tuck that end in as well. And then you can just run your fingers over it to feel if there's anything you can feel sticking out or anything scratching. And if you can, just tuck it in a bit more. If not, then it won't catch on anything either. So there you basically have your finished double hat pendant. And then you can obviously do with it what you want. You can just use this loop to put it on some chain, or you can make your own chain like I did for this one. So where I just made a gemstone chain. But that'll add a bit of colour to it as well, without having any stones in the actual piece. But that's completely up to you. I just made a rosary link chain on this and used garnet, about 3 or 4 mil, and then 2 mil hematite, and used wrap loops to make the rosary chain. So you could do that, or just use it in whatever way you want to use it. But here's basically a finished pendant. So I really hope that you enjoyed this, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make this elvish ear cuff. And this is what it looks like. So this is the design that I've chosen to do. And what you have is, you have this bare wire coming around the back of your ear that sits around the back, and then this comes around the bottom below your earlobe and then back up on the other side, and then this down on the other side of your ear in front, and then this